The last time I was talking about the part one of the Ark and the Dove, and I decided to forge forward, because I think it's probably going to take about 6 different broadcasts to cover this entire book. Even though we're not reading from the book, we are discussing the book and pulling a few things out of the book to make the point of what the book is really about. The book is really written by, it's written for Catholics to promote the Roman Catholic agenda. It's not written to expose them, so I'm using their own material to expose them. Last time we talked about people like Calvert and the Jesuits and Loyola, I can never say it right, Loyola, and the Society of Jesus, and Lord Baltimore, and the development of Maryland. Today we're going to go on and just talk about how this book further exposes their activities. Well, there were a lot of people in higher education that came out of Oxford, even a late guy. There's a lot of people that are proud of their association with Oxford. Dr. Richard Land used to be with the Religious Liberties Commission of the Southern Baptist Church, bragged about his association with Oxford University. And even though the Magna Carta had exerted a powerful influence over the constitutional history of England, it was now being transferred to the jurisprudence of all American colonies. The colonies claimed the rights and liberties under the Great Charter. There is one feature that is not only peculiar to the Maryland Charter, but is of greatest interest to the student of constitutional history, and that is the provision exempting the colony from taxation by the English government. Well, there was also a provision in the Charter that the grant itself should be received as sufficient and lawful discharge, payment, and acquittance if any attempt were ever made at any future time to levy a tax upon the free colony of Maryland. Maryland did not want to pay taxes to the federal government because they believe that, the Roman Catholic Church believes that they are all in all. They hold no allegiance to any government other than the Pope of the Pontiff, the Antichrist papacy. Well, this came up with this principle of no taxation without representation and all of this stuff. But the real issue was a theological purpose. It talks about that the two great principles of the Roman Catholic Church is their zeal for the rights of the common people. Where is that found during the Dark Ages of the Great Inquisition, I ask, when they tortured and maimed and killed and raped millions, upwards of 50 million people? And they want to talk about their concern for the common people. Well, they talk about nature and nature's God and the hand of divinity. Maryland was the only colony that claimed the Stamp Act was in direct violation of the terms of its charter. You know, the exemption in the Maryland Charter gave peculiar strength to the Maryland claim. Well, under the charter, Maryland, like Avalon, became a colony palatine. Under this form of government, the Lord Proprietary stepped into the place of a king, but an elective assembly being provided for the sovereignty of the Proprietary was limited and safeguarded. Maryland became a miniature England. So we have a miniature, they should have said Maryland became a miniature Vatican. That's what they should have said. There was no necessity for an established church or of a state religion in Maryland. Under the broad terms of the charter, the Lords Baltimore established for the first time in America a free religion and a free state. Yeah. Well, you know, we also have Cecil Calvert, the second Lord Baltimore. You know, 26 years of age, when his father died, he suddenly fell to him the full responsibility for carrying on the plans of the new colony. He also became a student at Trinity College, Oxford. His father announced his conversion to the Roman Catholic faith just before the son would have graduated. And of course, he inherited all of his, not only his father's estate, but he also knew of his father's plans and determination to open the door of Maryland to all who might seek sanctuary there. So Cecil Calvert, like his father, became an advocate for the Catholic Jesuit promotion of Maryland. Well, anyway, the English Jesuits were among the first to recognize that the futility of conversion by force, but the problem is that the Jesuits have assassinated and killed more people than any other group. You know, they don't tell you this in their own book. They try to make the Jesuits look like they are as pure as the driven snow when they're absolute murderers. One of the leaders of the English Catholics during the reign of Elizabeth, Lord Montague, made a speech in the House of Lords in opposition, providing that a Catholic who for a second time should refuse to subscribe to the oath of supremacy should incur the pain and penalty of high treason. And even to this day, Pope Francis and Pope John Paul has stated that the only salvation is through the Roman Catholic Church. It says in this book, the Society of Jesus did not lend itself to the persecution of those outside the faith. That's just a blatant, outright lie. That's all they did do was persecute those outside the faith. It says here, Ignatius Loyola, during his last days, prayed for Henry VIII and Martin Luther, and ordered masses to be said and prayers offered for England and Germany. Give me a break. The very purpose of the Society of Jesus was counter-reformation, is what it was. Well, there were some of the states that tried to push back against this proliferation of Roman Catholicism. One of them was the colony of Virginia. They made strong objections to the Maryland Charter. Okay. And so, but Maryland still got a grant, and they still continued on. When it came time to make the final plans for the voyage of the Ark and the Dove, Father White discovered that Lord Baltimore would not be able to make any adequate provisions for missionaries, and the new mission would have to be practically self-sustaining. This did not deter him, however, from going ahead with his plans, nor did it serve to dampen his ardor. Father Knott, who succeeded Father Moore as the English provincial, in a letter written to Belgian nuncio some years later, throws light on the hard conditions Father White at the last moment was obliged to assent to. Well, anyway, Lord Baltimore was trying to walk on thin ice between getting along with the Protestants and also not coming against the Jesuits. There were several attempts to try to keep the Ark and the Dove from sailing, but eventually those plans failed. And so they try to paint a picture that these Jesuits were under great persecution. And I a number of years ago had read a book on the Trail of Blood, and in there it said there's only two people. There's the persecutor and the persecutor. The Jesuits are the persecutors, believe me. Well, anyway, the book goes on and it talks about, so we go from George Calvert, to his son, Cecil Calvert, to carry on the new missionary endeavors of the Jesuits. But we know that whenever the Ark and the Dove, those ships sailed out, they took on board Jesuit mission priests and a number of other immigrants. And so the Catholics constituted a majority of the voyagers on the ships. If we look today, it's gone full circle. Look at the number of Catholic and Jesuit universities in the United States. Look at the Supreme Court. It's made up 9 of the Supreme Court justices are Roman Catholic. Look at the number of senators and congressmen now in the United States. Look at all the parishes. And look at all of the influence in the political spectrum throughout the United States of Roman Catholicism. Father White kept a journal of the voyage from which he afterward prepared his relation in Latin to send to his superiors for recording in the archives of the Society at Rome. He says he sees the hand of God in every escape from the pirates. I believe that God is sovereign over evil. I believe that God raises up kings like he did Pharaoh, and he brings down kings. And he talks about this voyage and all the things that the Ark and the Dove went through during their voyage and so on. It says that Father White had a reason to believe in the efficacy of fervent prayer. I wonder if he was praying to Mary at that time too, and the dead saints. I wonder if he had a patron saint. In the front of this book, it says the Franciscan Monastery Library, Old Mission, Santa Barbara, California. I knew a fellow one time. In fact, he represented me in my case against the state of Missouri. His name is Francis Mannion, and he was of the Franciscan order, and he told me that there were very many people praying to their patron saints when the jury ruled in my favor of my case. And I told him that dead people can't answer prayers. Well, they were really trying to mind control these people, even when they landed, as to what to say and what not to say, and not to let the word out what they were all about, and so on. I'm not going to go into all of that. But it says there was an official ceremony later at the place of the final settlement. And 300 years after the celebration of the first Mass on Maryland soil, a great cross, 40 feet high, was dedicated on the appropriate ceremony on St. Clement Island. And it has this inscription, in a bronze inscription. To this island in March 1634, Governor Leonard Calvert and the first Maryland colonists came in the Ark and Dove. Here they landed. Here they took possession of the province of Maryland. A cross of Maryland wood was erected, and the holy sacrifice was celebrated, meaning the Mass, of course. Here they first brought to the New World those principles of religious liberty which have been the chief glory of this state. Liberty. They promised them liberty. What the Bible says. They promised them liberty. Father White told in his narrative how the names of the Catholic saints were used to christen all the places of interest. That is an idolatry, what it is. I don't condone any kind of images, including images of Protestants like John Calvin or John Knox or Martin Luther or William Tyndale or any of. I don't believe in idolatry and imagery, and certainly not christening. It says, with the strong religious background of the voyage of the Ark and the Dove, the effect of the First Lord Baltimore's conversion to the Catholic faith on his plans of colonization, and solemn dedication of the project by Father White in his Declaration Colonna to the cause of the Christian religion. Again, when they say Christian religion here, they should say the Roman Catholic pagan sun-worshipping religion. St. Mary's was the capital of the colony, of course, St. Mary's. And they had the chronicles of the colonial Maryland. A gentle slope from the eastern hills, a spacious plateau of singular beauty, formed the site of St. Mary's city. They also built a St. Mary's fort. Okay. Thanks to the labors of the Jesuit missionaries, there were no Indian attacks. According to the traditional history, it was under the shade of a tree that the Catholic pilgrims assembled for their first Mass at St. Mary's. What are they talking about when they go to first Mass? They're talking about re-sacrificing Jesus all over again. That's what they're talking about. The fact that the Roman Catholic chapel was under the charge of the Jesuit missionaries is indicated by two letters written by Father Copley Fisher in 1638. He asked Lord Baltimore that the church in our houses may be sanctuaries. In 1643, he wrote to his superior inquiring whether our public chapels, not consecrated as yet, but only dedicated, have the privilege of those indulgences granted to other churches of the Society of Jesus, and the privilege of a Jesuit church. It says the site of the old city of St. Mary should long ago have been made one of the shrines of American history. For here surely is hallowed ground. It's not hallowed ground to me, it's blasphemous ground. Reminds me of Bonner when he started crying when the Pope started addressing the Congress of the United States. Says that as soon as it became known after the arrival of the Dove at Boston Harbor that the crew was mostly Catholic, some of them deignedly to call the Puritans their holy brethren, and that in the Maryland colony from whence the Dove sale, they did set up Mass openly. There was a feeling of unfriendliness and suspicion which soon took shape in open hostility. Well, there was continued hostility between the Catholics and the Protestants, and just like there's going to be continual hostility between true Christians today and the Antichrist Roman Catholic Jesuit Church. How can the two live together? One is antithetical, proclaiming all this false doctrine. And it says the labors of the Jesuit mission priest among the Indians bore fruit 100-fold. Well, they were prolific. They were proselyting Roman Catholicism to the American Indians. That's what they were doing. And that's what they've been doing to all Americans the last 200 years. Well, a lot of people were still proclaiming that the Jesuits and the Jesuit priests were of Antichrist. And of course, there were those that were in the Catholic Church who were coming and taking exception to these anti-Catholic sentiments, of course. And they were saying that they were being abused and all this stuff. Just like people today are saying they're abused when somebody speaks out against homosexuality or they speak out against other false doctrines like Mormonism, Mitt Romney, when he ran for president, you remember what he said? We're all God's children. No, we're not, Mitt Romney. We're not all God's children. There are vessels of honor and there are vessels of wrath. Well, one of them got upset because he came into the room where Protestants were reading out of a book, and that the Pope was the Antichrist, and Jesuit were anti-Christian ministers. And he told them that it was a falsehood and came from the devil. So they have two sets of rules. If you come against them, you're abusing them, but you can't. They can say anything they want to against you, Today, everybody wants to be just one happy family. They all want to be under one umbrella. That's what my dad told me they were going to do. He says one of these times, he told me when I was about 12 years old, Larry, one of these days, all the Assemblies of God, the Baptists, the United Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Nazarenes, the Church of God Holiness, the Pentecostals, and the Roman Catholics will all be under one umbrella. It's all one great big happy, just a world religion. That's what it is today. That's where it is right now. Nobody's standing up against these devils. Well, it all just continued to go on and on and on and on and on. Once you let him in, there's no stop. Once you let a devil in, he's not going to stop. In Jude it says there were men that kept in, slipped in unawares, you know. Well, some of these Protestants were not unaware that these men had slept in, had come into their midst. The use of the phrase Holy Church in the early laws of Maryland has given rise to much discussion. Some writers contend that it refers to the Roman Catholic Church, the same phrase being used in the Magna Carta. It had not been applied to the Church of England since the Reformation. Others contend that it only refers to the Church of England and so on. Well, how many times do we hear the phrase used today, the Holy Church, the Holy Roman Catholic Church? You know, why do they refer to the Pope as His Holiness? Call no man Father on the earth. Okay. And so, well, there's a lot of lies in this book as well. I'm not going to go into all the lies because they're promoting Roman Catholicism in this book. The author of this book, his name is J. Moss Ives, and his subtitle in the book is The Beginning of Civil and Religious Liberties in America. Civil and Religious Liberties. Now they call civil and religious liberties Black Lives Matter. Now they call civil and religious liberties indoctrinating your children into gender confusion. Now they call religious liberties gay marriage. Now they call religious liberties breaking into stores and not charging them with theft. Well, there were a lot of Catholics that started coming into the fore after this charter at Maryland. It basically gave open season for the Catholics. When it was said there was religious liberty, separation of state and church, independence of king and parliament, exercise of self-government in early Catholic Maryland, this is not stating the entire case. There was something of greater importance than of these. There were the equality of civil rights. Civil rights. And I heard Alan Keyes say this when he was running for president. Our rights come from God. God does not owe you rights. Now, for God's people, we've been blessed with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places, but God doesn't owe man rights. The only thing that God gives His elect is mercy and grace, unmerited favor. Unmerited favor doesn't speak of rights. Father Gabriel Drulitz, a Jesuit missionary, was sent to Boston with credentials from the Governor General of Canada to negotiate with Massachusetts authority a proposed alliance against warring tribes of Iraqi. Armed with credentials from his government, he was exempt from the law providing for banishment of a priest. He was received kindly and graciously, invited to dine with Governor Dudley at Roxbury with the Governor Bradford of the Plymouth colony. When he dined with Bradford, it was on a Friday, and the governor considered giving him a dinner of fish. Okay. Well, at one time, Roman Catholics were prevented from holding office, public office, and they were trying to protect themselves from this Antichrist. That's what they were trying to do. Now, we've heard a lot about Roger Williams and the Baptists and how that he was persecuted for his faith, and the Church of England were intolerant of his views because he came against infant baptism. And I'm with Roger Williams and his doctrine on coming against infant baptism. And he denounced the king as a blasphemer and a liar, and so on. And we know how that he ended up in Rhode Island. And it says in the days of Roger Williams, there was no sanctuary in Rhode Island for Catholics. It was the refuge for all sort of religious misfits. And it says that there was a good reason why there were no Catholics. They were not wanted. Well, why would you want someone who's promoting anti-Christian, anti-biblical doctrine in your colony? Why would you want them in here? It would be like Pineville Grace Fellowship putting a sign out in the yard, all are welcome. Not all are welcome. We don't welcome Roman Catholics into our assembly. They know what we believe. We know what they believe. Was it not natural for the founders of Rhode Island to keep the government in the hands of its friends? Why would they welcome their enemies, just like today? Open borders, let all the criminals into the country. Rapists, murderers, drug dealers, just open the door and let them all in. Well, anyway, it's one thing to preach the gospel to all men, but it's another thing to let them in amongst your midst and having them trying to push their garbage down your throat. Well, Cecil Calvert, the son of his father, he was in a turmoil of his colony. He was summoned by his brother to come to England to confer as to the policy to be followed to save the colony. He sailed for England in April of 1643, leaving his kinsman to act as governor. Um, well, so anyway, this person that kind of was left in charge, kind of, it went to his head, and he had a filthy mouth, and he ended up having to withdraw from the colony. And anyway, there was some breakdown. Whenever you have false doctrine, you have a breakdown in leadership, you know, every time. And you know, the Jesuits would always come out because they were subversives. They were underhanded. They took this oath that they would do anything, including lying and dying, to protect the Pope. Well, there were a lot of controversies during this time. There's been no chapter of Maryland history that has been more misinterpreted, this is what the Catholics say, than the controversy which arose between the Jesuit missionaries and the second Lord Baltimore relating to land holdings. It says the Jesuits have invariably been placed in a false light, and the yielding of their claims has usually been interpreted as establishing separation. That's exactly what the long end game is to make the Jesuits and the... Why is it that, have you ever thought about this? Why right now is Pope Francis a Jesuit Pope? That was the end game, to make the Jesuits in control. And they've got it now with their Jesuit Pope, Pope Francis. You can do a study on Pope Francis and see his doings in Argentina before he became Pope. His father White, who was so involved in all this, had been one of the Jesuit priests banished from England. You know, been banished. And many of the Jesuits have been banished throughout all the countries. And well, I think I'm going to stop there for our second session. Next time we're going to get more into Leonard Calvert and talk about his... he was the first governor of the province of Maryland. And we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about the ongoing acts of the Jesuits and how the Puritans were attacked by the Jesuits, and how that you know, they called it a land of sanctuary, and they found out that they ended up not having total control after all. And then they talk about the harvest, you know. And then once we get the harvest, we're going to get into the discussion about the Carroll family and their profound influence. But we'll get into that next time. There's a lot of material to cover in this book, believe me. And I've just scratched the surface of it. But I think it gives us a lot to consider as we think about the early settling of this country and the influence of these Jesuits on our founding of this nation. God bless for now.